welcome to Money and You. With me today, we've got Kate Reddington and Tom Hartmann from the Sorted team. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Kia ora.
Thanks for having us. Kia ora.
So I might start by getting you both to introduce yourselves, and some people might know what Sorted is all about and some people might have never heard of it. So if you could give a bit of an intro to what Sorted is and the work that you do there. Tom, we might start off with you.
That sounds great. So I've had the privilege of working on Sorted for close to 10 years now, and it's New Zealand's free money guide. And a lot of people don't know this, but Sorted is put out by the Office of the Retirement Commissioner, and it's for everyone. And it's not trying to sell you anything, but it has a lot of really good information so that people can lift their money skills, make informed decisions about things like debt and KiwiSaver and mortgages. And my role really has a lot to do with creating the guides, the blogs, and the tools, all the information that goes up there on a regular basis in order to inform people. So that's what my role is about.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Kia ora, my name is Kate, and I am the sort of website lead. So I work really closely with Tom, who is our personal finance lead, is our go-to and kind of knowledge base for everything. And I just, reiterate what he said, sort of it's a great place to get trusted, independent advice and to sort of motivate you to improve your financial well-being, I think, which is a really important part of well-being that I think some people sometimes don't necessarily consider. But it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks both for joining us and thanks for the intros. I guess, Kate, you mentioned financial well-being, and that's something that Money and You is all about. We're trying to help improve Kiwis' financial well-being and financial confidence. And I wanted to ask you, both of you actually, we talk about all these different terms, financial know-how, financial literacy, financial well-being. What are we actually talking about? Are they all the same thing? Are we just using different words for what is actually just one thing that we're talking about? I'm just wondering if you can shed some light on that for people watching or listening.
I was really glad that Kate mentioned financial well-being, because that's essentially what we're after. But in order to get there, we need financial capability. And what we're talking about there is just basically the ability to manage money well, to make it's complex. There's a lot behind it in terms of behaviors, attitudes, things that we've been brought up with. But essentially what we're after, and when we're talking about financial well-being, is that we're able to meet all our present commitments right now. And then also we have resilience for the future. So we also are in a good place to meet those future commitments.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been really interesting, even in my, I guess, relatively short time at the Commission compared to Tom. But I have been here for about 4 years, and it's been interesting to see the transition from financial literacy in the industry as that being sort of the end goal to financial capability, which I think is, as Tom said, it's a bit more behavior and attitudes based in addition to that knowledge. And I think where we've come to is this concept of financial well-being, which is really all of it together. And so that the knowledge and skills and understanding, but then also the attitudes and behaviors that really support financial well-being as well. So it's been a really interesting evolution, I think, and there's been lots of incredible people doing a lot of research in this space that have sort of built this more holistic view. Those, I guess, would be some of my thoughts on it as well.
So there's this huge gap between knowing the right thing to do and actually doing the right thing, right? And the whole game is sort of to bridge that. So you could start with information, but you really have to get to a place where you're actually doing something different, and that doing something different gets you that better result, gets you towards that well-being that we talked about. If we had a magic wand, everybody would have financial well-being. but we don't. So we try to lift financial capability, and then well-being will come out of that.
So essentially, it's not about having a lot of money necessarily. It's about having those tools and the knowledge to manage it better. Is that sort of what you would? Yeah, nodding so.
Absolutely. And I think as well, what's really important at Sorted is thinking about what that means to you, the financial wellbeing aspect. And I think that it's very different for different people. And you're absolutely right. It is not dictated by how much money you have, but more how you manage it, as Tom was saying, and how you're on top of your current lifestyle and then your resilience for the future. So all of those things Tom mentioned before, I think, tie into it, but it's definitely not connected necessarily to how much it is that you have.
Yeah, it's a lot about meeting your needs comfortably, and people are in very different situations, depending on their households and what their commitments are and how many dependents they have and all this sort of thing. And so it's definitely not about everybody being rich, but about being able to meet everyone's needs comfortably, whether it's for you personally or it's for your whānau, your extended family. Everybody has different situations that they need to accommodate and provide for.
So on that, I guess Kiwis are probably, there's a broad spectrum of how we're tracking in terms of our financial capability or well-being. What have you found in terms of how we're faring in that space? Are Kiwis good at managing their money? Do we have a high level of financial well-being, or do we need to improve it?
Yeah, so just on that, we know that there's a lot of work to be done in financial well-being, but in terms of our capability, we actually score pretty well on some things, and we could score a lot better on other things. So, for example, day-to-day budgeting, tracking our expenses, and not using debt so much, we actually do pretty well comparatively, even internationally. But where we get ourselves into trouble is more that long-term thinking, or what we find more challenging, I should say, is more that long-term thinking and actually understanding financial products and actually comparing them, telling them apart, making sure we're selecting the right ones for our needs. That's where it gets complicated.
I think what is some other things that came out of that research that I found really interesting and really encouraging as well is just the different strengths of different kind of groups in New Zealand, and sort of seeing that we all have different things that we're really good at, and I think where we can kind of share that knowledge, I think will really make some headway.
Now we're currently recording this in a level 4 lockdown, or Tom's just moved to level 3, so enjoying.
Yeah, there's not much difference.
But obviously we've been in and out of lockdowns now for 18 months or so, and I imagine that in research that we've done at the FSC has sort of shown that that COVID and these lockdowns have had an impact on Kiwis' wellbeing overall, and also on our financial wellbeing. Is that something that you've also noticed over the last sort of 18 months or so?
It's definitely impacted different groups in different ways, and so we've definitely seen it sort of almost enhance the inequalities, I think. For people that have sort of suffered a loss in income or a change in circumstances, they've been hit really hard, and it's had a big impact on their finances. Whereas on the other hand, for some people, lockdown's been really positive for their financial behaviours, because obviously in lockdown you can't really spend your money. So that's really allowed some people to work on their savings and build their emergency funds, which has been really positive. So it's definitely impacted different people differently, but for a lot of people, it has been really tough and had a really, really intense impact on not only their financial well-being, but their well-being in general.
For so many people, the experience of lockdown is horrible in the sense financially that you can't earn an income the way you're used to earning it. But one of the things I really like about lockdown is, as Kate mentioned, it sort of is an opportunity to hack your finances, because we're so habitual that lockdown has come along and interrupted that. And so it's an opportunity to ask ourselves, well, okay, what do I want to continue? What don't I want to continue? What can I do differently? And it turns out that a lot more is up to us than actually it seems. And when we're in that routine, that frenetic pace of life, there's not really that opportunity to really to take stock, take a moment and make some key decisions like that on what to do and what to continue and what to not continue.
You're both in the business of helping to educate New Zealanders and help grow their financial capability and their well-being. What do you do to sort of improve your own financial well-being and financial capability? And maybe Kate, will start with you. What are some of the things that you've been doing over the last maybe 18 months or so that have really helped you in particular, or maybe some lessons that you've learnt?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question. I equally love and hate this question because it's a little bit embarrassing, but also I think it's quite relatable in that when I started at the Commission as a learning designer, my financial capability, I wouldn't say was that good. And money hadn't been something I'd really spent a lot of time or energy thinking about. So I've gone on this learning journey whilst supporting other people on theirs, which has been a pretty incredible experience, actually. And if I think sort of about some of the things that have really helped me in that journey, and honestly, it has changed my life. So when I started, and I'm just going to say three things that were sort of the core things that really changed my life. So one of them was tracking my spending and seeing exactly what I was spending my money on. That was a real eye-opener. The second thing was sitting down and thinking what's really important to me. And it sounds easy and maybe a little bit silly, but understanding that really allowed me to understand what I wanted to spend my money on, which therefore made it easier to identify what I didn't want to be spending my money on. And that in itself was such a game changer. The third thing I would say, having an emergency fund. So that was something that I had no idea about, no concept of, which for a lot of people listening might think that's really silly, but actually it's more common than you might think. And just that process of building that safety net, and look, it did take me a while, but just chipping away at it, automatic payments over time, over a couple of years, I've built this little emergency fund that I know is there. So if something does happen, if I have like emergency car repairs needed or a dentist appointment, I know that I can cover that without using my credit card or going into debt. And I didn't realize how much finances were stressing me out until I had that emergency fund in place. Like, I just had no idea. And having that emergency fund in place, just it is like it's a safety blanket. It's a security, like knowing that, you know, you've got your expenses covered, and then if emergency happens, you're okay. And yeah, that's been a big change for me. So many more, but I'll leave it there.
No, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing. I actually just wanted to ask, just in relation to that emergency fund that you mentioned, it's something that you know, some people watching or listening might have heard before but weren't quite sure of what it meant. Essentially, it's a fund that you have for an emergency, right? Or maybe some people might call it a rainy day fund or something similar, so that when, like you said, you know, your car breaks down or something happens that is an emergency, not when you know, want to buy a new pair of shoes or something like that, but, you know, it's there for you. And I know that there are, you know, different perspectives on how much you actually need in that fund. Obviously, you don't have to share how much you've currently got in there, but is there sort of a perspective that's sorted as to how much you should have in an emergency fund to feel secure?
Yes, but the answer is it absolutely depends on you and your situation. We generally recommend starting off aiming for $1,000. And, you know, if you, for example, if you don't have a car or you don't, you know, tend to have too many emergencies, which, I mean, lucky you, then maybe you can start with 500 or something along those lines. But that first $1,000, I think, is a really great place to start. And then from there, how you build that is up to you. You might want to sort of slow down a little bit if you've got other priorities, but getting to that $500 or $1,000 first, I think, is a really great start. And then, yeah, just keep building it. A lot of people talk about having 3 months of expenses, and that's a great goal, but that's not going to happen overnight. I mean, neither is 1,000, but yeah, I think sort of chipping away at it regularly, and whatever makes sense for you, whether that's $5 a week, $50 a week, whatever works for you and your budget. Yeah, I guess that's the long answer, but the short answer is whatever's right for you in your situation.
Just to add to that, if you work backwards from the risk you're trying to cover, Kate mentioned, for example, a car repair. Well, if you don't have a car, you might not need that much. Lots of times when we think about having 3 months worth of expenses set aside, which is really, it might frighten you off at first if you're just getting started. But the idea there is if you're out of work, right? If you go through a redundancy or something like that, that actually, if you couldn't work for 3 months, or even, you know, for some people who are self-employed, they might need more like 6 months or something like that if their income is interrupted. That the goal of that. But, you know, some people might not need that if they have income protection insurance or something like that. So it really depends on what you have in order to cover those risks.
That's really good. Thanks, Tom and Kate. And Tom, what sort of worked for you, and what sort of strategies have you used to improve your financial well-being and perhaps the well-being of your whānau as well, and people around you?
Yeah, so I think this has definitely been a learning journey for me as well. I mean, I had been someone who, my background's in journalism, and then I worked in the mortgage industry, so I understood finance a little bit, and working on Sorted brings those two things together. But I can't say that I was a genius with money. In fact, I got myself into a lot of trouble overseas by managing our household, even you know, just on credit on 2 gold cards from American Express. It was just you know, it wasn't the best way of doing things. I was someone who had made a lot of money, but then spent a lot of money, made a lot of money, and spent a lot of money. And if you can, and you can see that sort of flat lines over time, you really never get anywhere. So for me, I'm someone who needs to be as automated as possible. That's why systems like KiwiSaver, systems like automatic payments, they work really well for me. And probably the most fundamental thing that's made the most difference is that the idea of paying yourself first. And this is a way to save. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically when you earn money, when you get paid, instead of paying everyone else first, all the bills you have in your life and all that, and then hoping to save whatever's left over. Because usually what happens is there's not a lot left over, is you actually funnel money towards your goals first. And this has really been really helpful to me to hack our finances, to get the results out of it, that what we want in order to hit our goals. So I think that's been probably the most fundamental things. Kate will know, in the past year or so, I've been trying to focus on what savings is most meaningful to us. What savings makes the most difference. So, for example, if you find a bargain or something like that, you're saving money. That doesn't really make that much of a difference, especially in the long term. If you're saving for your next holiday, that's good because you're not putting yourself in debt. But over the long term, that really doesn't do it. So, what part of our savings is really going to those things that really increase our net worth over time, and we've been calling that meaningful savings. That's been really good, and that's really what all of getting sorted and all of personal finance is about. If you can pinpoint that meaningful savings that's really driving your position upward, that's what we want, is growth. And if we can, the higher that is, the better position you're going to get in quicker.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So we'll wrap things up, I guess, by getting your tips on what people listening or watching can do to improve their financial capability or financial well-being. And I guess bearing in mind that it is quite a stressful time at the moment, and some people might feel quite stressed out and worried about their finances. And I know I've been in this position before. It's almost like it's too stressful to even think about. You just don't even want to look at it or talk about it or think about it. So just, I guess, bearing in mind that there will be some people that kind of think, along those lines. What would be your tips for Kiwis out there that are wanting, to make some small little changes that will alleviate the stress a little bit?
To me, this is a great opportunity for us to hack our financial lives. So if you ever want to see how habitual you are, is download the last 3 months of bank statements and just look at exactly how you've spent your money. And you'll see yourself going back to the same places, pretty much buying the same. I mean, maybe I'm more habitual than other people, who are more creative and do lots of new things. But I find that, you end up going back to the same stores, the same cafe, the same. And so you can easily see what your behaviors are, what you've been doing up to now. And it's really easy, actually, while everything's interrupted, to just say, oh, yeah, you know what? I think I'll do something different. Or just make some adjustments here and there. And the other thing I'd recommend, it's great if you have some extra time on your hands, because of lots of the activities are on pause at the moment, is you could look into what your KiwiSaver settings are like, what your investment settings are like, and also to do a lot of those things that maybe we, with the pace of life, we don't have time to do. Like, are you paying too much in fees? Or, we've got this great calculator on Sorted that actually estimates over, until you reach 65, how much you're going to pay in fees, and that's tens of thousands of dollars behind the scenes. And if you just take a look and run some of your numbers also for the long term, like, whether you're on track for things like a retirement, starting earlier, you can make those little adjustments and just see what you're on track to achieve. And then if you need to make adjustments, you have the time to do that. It's actually a lot easier than leaving it till the last minute. So those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah, definitely. Great suggestions. I would support those for sure as well. One place that could be a good place to start, if you have a bit of capacity mentally and emotionally, and if you don't, that's absolutely fine. But on the Sorted website, we have this wonderful section called 6 Steps to Get Sorted. And what it does is it just gives you a really good overview, step by step, of things to kind of get on top of to put you in a really good position moving forward. And I think for a lot of people, they'll be able to go through and check the boxes and feel really confident about the direction that they're heading in and that they've got that base sorted. And for some people, they'll recognize that there's some things that they need to work on. And it's this really straightforward checklist type thing that supports you to get your emergency fund started, and as Tom mentioned, get on top of your KiwiSaver settings, tackle your debt, and there's just 6 steps, I think, that really support people building their confidence with their money. And the other thing I would also say is that, and Clarissa, you mentioned like a lot of people will be struggling at this time. And I would say that there's some good help on Sorted on our main page on the carousel. We've got some helpful articles about where to go if you need a bit of extra support. So there's the COVID-19 government site with a bit of a tool that shows you what you might be eligible for. And finally, I would also recommend the great people at Money Talks. And Money Talks is a free helpline run by FinCat, and they have financial mentors on call who can help you and support you with any money concerns you might have. And they provide an excellent service. We're really lucky to have them, actually.
You can even use them anonymously, right? Yeah, you don't even have to.
Yeah, so I guess that those would be my sort of 3 things to leave people on. So the 6 steps is great, just to kind of work through some steps on your own. The support that's available that you can find through Sorted, and also talking to Money Talks is another great place to go.
Fantastic. Oh, thanks so much for that, for all those tips and resources. Hopefully people watching or listening to this will find something to help them, and even if it's just doing one of those things can make such a huge difference. So really appreciate you sharing all that with us today. And yeah, thanks for joining me again.
Tēnā koe, Clarissa, thank you so much for having us.
Kia ora. It's been great to be with you. Fantastic.